So thank you. It's good to see you again. We only chatted, I think, a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Which was a nice refresher after not seeing you for years at PwC. I've found that I think was it 3 out of the 5 podcasts I've done now are ex-PwC women, and I'm not sure what that says about PwC, people leaving to
Well, I think with PwC, it is an amazing company, and you're going to be collectively hiring like the top talent across the country, and so you'll find a lot of people who are just probably quite entrepreneurial go-getters and just want to get their own thing going at a certain point in their life anyway. Plus, just because of the nature, I think, of professional services, you learn that it's about your network and about, building up that kind of experience and client sort of work and facing stuff. So that's what I think it's about, really. And I mean, there's 250,000 globally. So that's a big company, right?
330,000, I think it was when I left last year. So who knows what it's at a year later. But no, you're right. It's a place where there is lots of talent that I think get to a point that say, actually, if I can't find what I want next in this space, then I'll have a go at doing it myself. And yeah, so tell me about your checkered career and how you've got where you are today.
I have had a very checkered career. Sometimes I feel like when a recruiter looks at my CV, they're a bit like, what? But thankfully, I don't even need a recruiter to look at my CV anymore because I've got my own thing going on. But before we get to the end, I graduated from uni, because honestly my checkered career is really long. So I graduated from uni and I went to Japan and I taught English out there for a couple of years with the JET program, which is an acronym for the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, because I didn't fancy going straight down the city like all of my friends. And I mean, I knew I was going to move to London and I'm from London. So I thought, actually, let's go overseas and teach English and do something really interesting and fun, which I did. Then I got really into art and thought about being an art curator because I loved all the Japanese aesthetic. So then went to Venice to the Guggenheim Museum and did an internship there in art curation. Decided that the art world probably wasn't the right space for me. So when I came back to London, then I joined the Foreign Office.
Wow.
And again, sort of spent a couple of years there, decided that government, even though the Foreign Office was cool and groovy, and I had, at that point, Japanese and Italian and English pretty well at those stages. English I'm still working on. Then I realized that it probably wasn't quite the right fit for me in terms of hierarchy and everything having to be in a certain box. So decided to go back into teaching, but this time do something where I sort of could straddle a couple of things. And I did something called Teach First. And Teach First is where you get dropped into a challenging school. And then the Teach First network has a huge connection to different companies in the city. And one of them was PwC. They were a big supporter and advocate of Teach First. So then joined PwC through that. And then was at PwC, that's where we knew each other for about 5 years. And then during that time and during my teaching career, I was very interested in EdTech, so education technology. So how are we creating and evolving things to help people learn? And obviously we met through the learning bits of like PwC, and just, now it's ubiquitous, especially during the pandemic. Everyone's like, online learning, of course. But, 5-6 years ago, everyone's like, that's never going to work. It's never going to be a thing. And it's just so interesting to see how far we've come. Then after PwC, decided to join a startup that was actually a learning platform. So got to understand the startup scale-up world being in a SaaS platform. And then joined a company for leadership development. And then actually got to the point where I was like, I'm going to do my own thing. I really love this kind of blend of the consulting, and I love the space of the startup scale-up world. So I'm going to just focus in on that. So then decided to do my own thing and set up a company called Slate Digital, which focuses just on that space. So the startup scale-up space. providing consulting, coaching, and whatever else that they need, because there's often a lot of things that they need that they don't have because they're just basically trying to get the company going and up and running. And then that's me right now. So it's really checkered because it goes through a fair few different industries and different countries as well. But I think it's really some great skills that I wouldn't have got had I followed a simple linear path.
It's just very checkered. It's amazing. And I love that you talk about it with such a flow as well, so that it doesn't feel like there was any kind of and maybe there were some challenges, or what was driving each of the points of change for you?
Well, I have actually thought about this at length because I'm quite a reflective character, and there's always three kind of key things that kind of I focus on with my career or my life in general. And one of them has been education. So even though it was all over like the world, I was following this education pathway, right? Thinking about, teaching in Japan or teaching in the UK. And then in a strange sense, like consulting can be a lot like teaching, because you're trying to learn a lot about a subject and then you're trying to help others to understand a particular complex problem and how you're going to solve it. So things like, storytelling, or, being able to communicate a message quite clearly so others understand. Those skills all come into the fore when I'm consulting, and just generally being quite organized and having no time all the time. And then the other key parts are kind of, and they have changed over time, but the other one was kind of adventure, and this whole idea of trying to sort of challenge myself to do new things I've never done before. And then the other one is always about innovation. So what can I sort of find out that's new and interesting, and kind of keep following that. I'm quite intuitive with my own career path. I think that it's less kind of analyze all the data, see which one pays the best and see what happens. It's more what feels right to me and what's kind of intuitively right for me. And that's why I think it's quite interesting to somebody else. They might see my CV and it make no sense, but equally to someone else, they might see that thread. And it's that ability to craft that story and explain, well, this is my journey and this makes complete sense to me because I followed what I was really passionate and interested in all along the way. And I think, that's paid dividends for me. I can't really say I've been in a job very long that I wasn't really learning a lot from and gaining a lot from. So that's a win, I think, from my point of view.
Yeah, I love it. I love that intuition, bringing on the change, knowing just sort of what feels right. You're right there. I mean, there are some people, and I've been one of these as well, with other sorts of decisions where the pros and cons list that you make for things like this. But I think at the end of the day, intuition's got to be what motivates you as well to be making your decision if it feels right.
Well, I learned recently about intuition because I was doing a little bit more work on myself to understand my emotional literacy. And this guy who was running the course, he explained how the greater emotional literacy you have, the greater understanding of your own emotions and how they work, the greater access you have to your intuition. And for him, your intuition is almost like your connector to your subconscious mind through like understanding your emotions better, because a lot of everything that kind of makes us who we are resides in the subconscious. And that really helped me to kind of go, yeah, that makes total sense, because the more I understand myself better and what lights me up or what turns me off is going to really help me then to keep accelerating towards the things I'm really good and passionate about.
Yeah, that resonates a lot, especially in a coaching space as well. And you've done coaching, haven't you? So it's when you're learning to be a coach, and I'm sitting here obviously with some like trigger questions here, just in case I'm not sure what to ask. But at the same time, actually, the conversations that flow and the coaching conversations that flow are the ones that just come from your intuition and thinking, just listen to the conversation and, where do you feel this needs to go next, and what's going to be interesting, and what needs to be spoken about, and listening to the other people. So intuition is such a thing that people can't necessarily describe or sort of say what it is or where it comes from, but yet we all sort of know what it is and
Yeah,
how
and
much we use it.
I think for me, the way I've helped myself to learn more about my own intuition is it's usually a quieter voice. It's not usually like, and it's not necessarily a voice per se, it's like just a quieter sense. It's not sort of screaming at me going, Ilona, do this thing. It's not like that. It's more sort of like gentle nudges and pushes in the right direction. And it's more like, oh, yeah, that kind of feeling for me. Whereas I
Yeah.
think when it's instinct or maybe like a reaction, it's like, it's kind of in response to something. It feels much more gradual intuition. And again, as I get older and have had more life experience and work experience, I think the biggest thing I've had to learn the past couple of years is that things change more constantly than you realize. And what might have worked for you, even as recently as like a couple of months ago, might not be quite right. And it's just having those moments to check in and be like, is this really what I want to do next? Is this really where I want to go? Is this how I'm trying to do this thing? And sometimes you might not have a clue where you're going with it or whatever, but if it's kind of feeling right and working out, then you kind of feel it out as you go.
Yeah, I love that. It really aligns with how I like to coach people through transitions. If you're not quite sure, it's that follow what you feel is the best, where you think you're aiming for, but take it with really small steps and what feels right, but sort of aiming towards that goal, even if you're not sure what it is. But taking it in such small steps that if you make one step and it's not right, you can readjust really easily without anything too big or scary
Yeah.
happening. So yeah, I like that, and using intuition to help guide you through those
You have to.
next steps.
When I think about it, and when anybody really reflects on it properly, you are the expert in you. No one else is. You are. You know how you tick. You're the only one with you all the time. So if you can, when I've done coaching sessions for other people, it's remarkable because actually, like, honestly, like, this, but 99% of the time they know the answer. That it's either life's really busy, they haven't had a chance to reflect, they may be putting, like, they're limiting themselves by almost self-rejecting before they've even got there, but they know what they want to do. Most people, when you have the conversation with them, they'll be like, oh, I've always wanted to do X. And then you find out that they're secretly doing a bit of X on the side, but they're not putting it to the forefront of their career or talking to their boss about it or just putting it out there on the internet or whatever. But like, it's very rare I've gone into a coaching conversation and they're like, I have absolutely no idea. We have nothing more to talk about. They might say I've got no idea, but by the end of the conversation, they're like, oh, wow, it is this thing I've always wanted to do, that I've secretly always wanted, but I just was never giving myself permission to do. Because I've always wanted to do what I'm doing right now. I remember I was honest to God, 17, in the IT room at my school. And this was back in the day when your IT lesson was like, create a password to log into the computer. Like, this was not like this now.
I remember those days.
And I remember they were doing like some weird, search on the internet for jobs you might want to do in the future kind of class, where they're obviously hungover from the day before the teachers, because that was such a strange class to do. And I remember hearing this term somewhere, and I heard this term portfolio career, where you do different things. And I was like, that sounds brilliant, because I was like, then I can do a bit of this, bit of that, and the other thing. When I said that to the IT teacher, they were like, what's that? What are you on about? And I was like, no, that sounds great. I can do a bit of these different things within the same sort of area, but I want a portfolio career. But now I have one. It just took me 22 years to get there from leaving school. So I knew what the answers were. I just wasn't prepared to do it. And you got in my own. I kind of have a portfolio career when you think about my checkered past, my checkered career.
Yeah, definitely. I had no idea about a portfolio career or having that more sort of pretty way of thinking about moving between jobs. I always thought the way that I transitioned from job to job was because I was just not settling down to, have that career mindset. But actually, when I look back at it now and reflect on it, it's really because I was just finding work that worked for me at the time, that I enjoyed. And when I stopped enjoying it, I looked for something different. And I just took what I'd learned from the previous role to the next one, and it did something a bit different, or just to be in a different environment. And then switching to contracting when, I thought, well, I just want to save up and go traveling, so I need more money, but I don't want, permanent job and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting. I had no idea about sort of that sort of more entrepreneurial way of thinking about a career and being in a portfolio career, which is where I am now without even sort of meaning to get here, just dipping into all kinds of things. So what what were the what challenges did you have to overcome through your checkered career?
Loads. I mean, I don't think you can have a career without some. I mean, some people do, but I think if you're challenging yourself, it can be like, I think that's part of the journey. I think for me, a big one that was hard conceptually to get my head around for a little while was when I came back from Japan and in Italy, and I've done all these incredible things. I've learned these languages, I've got a great degree, I've done all the things that, according to the rule book that I was sold at school, I've done very well, top uni, top grades, blah, blah, blah. I've done all the things. But it was the financial crisis, the big global financial crisis. And so even though I had all this experience and all these skills, nobody wanted to hire me. And I was really kind of like, but I've done all the things. And I felt very much like I was behind, even though I'd sort of done these incredible things that were different. I was behind in the sense that people who had just gone from uni and then got a job straight away, they were obviously in their careers, still trying to hold on for dear life, because it wasn't like it was certain for them either. But equally, I was like, well, this is a real challenge conceptually to understand. But, if I could go back to my 25-year-old self, who was really stressing and worrying about that, I'd be like, sweetheart, don't worry. It will all work out. Just be honest to yourself about what you want to do and where you want to go. And, don't take anybody putting you down like that. You don't have to accept less than what you deserve. But it took a long time for me to kind of recover from that almost like cognitive dissonance, that even if you've played the game really, really well, it doesn't automatically result in amazing outcomes for you. It's definitely better than not having them, but it's not a guarantee that your career will always be perfect or you'll get all the opportunities you've ever wanted. It was the first time I think I'd ever had a setback or it hadn't gone my way, but it was a great thing to learn early on, because it made me much more resilient, I think, later on when I sort of faced different challenges at work.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, yeah, things never really work out to plan, do they? I think I feel like there are a lot of younger generation coming out of uni in that same sort of situation where they've got these amazing degrees, but no work experience. And so they're not finding the jobs as easy, and there's huge amounts of debt with them now as well. And I don't know what the answer is for them. It's, but I can see that must be a challenge to a lot of the younger generations at the moment.
Well, I mean, not just that. I think there needs to be more sort of help to get more younger people into the workforce, or giving them the skills that they need. I think often it's just seen as a hassle when actually it could be a real benefit to your organization. But I think it's just complicated for companies to think about investing in that. But if you've invested in someone who's just graduated and helping them to grow, as I imagine the startup scene actually would be a great place for a lot of people to get their first jobs and things, but it's just getting those opportunities to come onto the table. But yeah, it's not easy for young people right now. It's never ever been easy. I think it must have been like the 60s where it was easy. Well, every other generation seems to say it's just not very easy when you first graduate.
Yeah, I went straight out to work. I didn't even finish my A levels. Actually, I dropped out about 3/4 of the way through and decided to go and get a job And I found, just building the experience and then going to university later on in life, when I actually knew what I wanted to do and what I was going to do with it, I didn't always do what I thought I was going to do with it either. So it's 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 fun finding your way through these things, I think. Um, so what was I going to ask you? Obviously, this podcast is for women trying to find work that works,
Mm.
and women trying to find their way into the workspace that maybe haven't been in work for a period of time, or changing careers. What sort of, I guess, insights could you share from your learnings of, your checkered career for these ladies?
Yeah, well, one of them is actually like coaching for like, so do you know, you must know, I'm going to name her in this, you can edit it, but I'm just going to do a shout out to Catherine Pynchon.
I do know Catherine, yeah.
So when I was at PwC, I had got to the point where I was wanting to do a master's degree, but I was, having a great time and doing lots of great things at the company. And so I booked in, because PwC have this, for a coaching conversation. So you book it in, etc. And I had Catherine, I'd never met her before. And in those 50 minutes, we had completely blown my brain open to what was possible. Before I went in, it was, should I stay or should I go? Like that classic song, should I stay or should I go? That's what I was weighing up for a long time. And in the conversation, in this coaching conversation with Catherine, suddenly we got, because of the conversation, my brain opened up to the possibility of, and like, what could I do if it was and? So what if I did the degree and I stayed at PwC? And that actually happened. But if I hadn't have had this conversation with Catherine, I would never have even considered I could have done both. So then I left that conversation, had conversations with other people, and then about 3 months later, I was living in Amsterdam doing my master's degree and working for PwC at the same time. And I was like, how has this all come together? And it was amazing, because that then spurred me on to do my coaching qualification, because I was like, this is magic. I want more magic to be out there in the world. And I think part of it is the way that you're taught at school, in terms of a didactic understanding. So it's usually black, white, yes, no. You're always thinking in opposites. It's also from like studying a bit of neuroscience. It's about like, that's how your brain naturally works. To actually come up with other possibilities, you need to be in a different frame of mind. And that's why the questioning can really help you to then think about alternatives. And so anyone who's kind of like going, what do I want? Where do I want to go? Or how do I want to do all this? If you can't like invest in a coach at this point, that's okay. But like, there's so many resources out there where you can do some journaling just to kind of start uncovering things for yourself. You can get a mate to kind of go through some questions with you. And you can, so me and my friend, we actually sat, I remember like in, I think it was Gourmet Burger Kitchen, and we just sort of did some journaling next to each other going, what do I want to do with like my next career path sort of thing. So anything where you're doing a little bit of self-reflection and exploration and allowing yourself to think of what's possible. Because 2 years ago, no one in a billion years would have been like, we can all work remotely or work from home or have complete remote companies. And now this is a thing which is quite common. It's accepted. So if you're thinking, you know what, I'd love to have a job where I work 3 days a week and I'm totally remote and I can live anywhere I want to live within reason because of like different visa laws, and I'd like to work with these kinds of people and do these kinds of things, it is possible. It might not happen straight away, but it totally is possible. But I think the first step to getting to know, like to getting what you want, is to really know what it is you want, and accepting that along the way it may change and pivot slightly, and that's okay. It's not like you're wedded to that, but that's a really important step. Like, what if it all worked out? What if it all worked out? I keep asking myself that, and I'm like, oh yes, groovy.
I mean, there's so many things that you just threw out there that I'm struggling to trace back on all of them, like the activities. I love the sort of free resources, look and see what's out there.
Yeah.
I did that myself with a number of podcasts and books and all sorts, whatever's your bag really, of where you like to learn from. Catherine Pinchon was also my career coach for a year at PwC, so I've had that pleasure as well. Our lovely conversations out on the veranda at Embankment Place.
It's also
And
useful because, just to say about Catherine, or like
yeah,
if you're doing this with someone, it's super useful, I think, to talk to a friend who's maybe a bit different to you. Because the thing about Catherine, I was lucky enough to get to know her better afterwards. It was, we're very different. And so actually having someone who has a different perspective and a different way of looking at things when you're doing this coaching exploration can be really, really powerful.
yeah, that's a really great point, because you want someone that can challenge your thinking, throw some different ideas at it, and yeah, really open your mind to some different ways of thinking and some ideas. And that leads me on to the next point that I think you were getting at as well, when you're knowing what you want to do. And a great way of doing that is to talk to people. You know, if you don't know what you want to do, it'd be quite difficult to, you might be able to visualize it a bit. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Where do I want to be? And who do I want to be? But how do I know what sort of jobs are available for me to do that fit that? So then having those conversations with people and starting to network and explore and just get some ideas, going to job fairs and entrepreneur fairs and things like that, startup, fairs and things like that. Just like go talk to people and see what they do, and yeah, what their flexibility is like. More, like you say, more organizations are becoming a lot more flexible in the way that they work with their employees, which I think is just fantastic for women, who tend to be the ones that ask for the flexibility and need it for, balancing their busy lives. So and wanting to have more portfolio career as well, so that you can maybe do that studying or working on something different whilst you're bringing in some money that's a bit more stable. So those are, yeah, awesome tips for
I'm also
people
gonna
out there.
I'm going to drop a bit of a truth bomb here because it blew my mind open recently. But there's a chap called Jordan Peterson, and he wrote the 10 Rules of Life or something, but he's predominantly writing for men. But when I watched a little clip that my partner sent me, I was kind of, oh man. And what he was talking about, Jordan Peterson, was with like in work, you have to have like, there's like almost like a graph. So you've got conscientiousness and agreeability. So how agreeable are you and how conscientious are you? To be successful at work, you do have to be conscientious, right? You can't do a rubbish job and expect to be promoted or to get opportunities. Like, people just won't want to continue to work with you because they're not conscientious. But agreeability is very interesting because actually people who aren't so agreeable, i.e. they ask for what they want, but equally, you don't want to be completely someone really disagreeable, because then no one wants to work with you. But he said women tend to be very agreeable and very conscientious. So you're the perfect workers for the organization because you're never going to ask for too much and you're always going to do a great job. So I think what I took away from that, because I was like, no. And I was like, yeah, it's true. You're too agreeable. Like, are you just accepting what is being given to you? Are you agreeing to like things that don't actually fit exactly what you want? Are you even contemplating to ask what you want? When I've asked for what I want, like I'd say about 90% of the time, it's actually been okay. It's also the way you ask, right? If I go up to someone and go, give me this, no one's going to feel like doing that. But if I'm like, hey, how could we work out a way that I could work a bit more flexibly or do this or do that? Usually it's absolutely fine. Remember, it's a conversation. It shouldn't be like a confrontation. It's a conversation, not a confrontation. But that agreeability thing, I think if all women could almost plot themselves on an agreeability chart, they would all be up the top end and be like, yeah, I'm very agreeable. And it's like, that's not going to be helpful if you want to have a career that's designed around what you want.
It's so true. I've caught I would definitely put myself in that agreeable mindset at points in my career. And actually, it's only now that I'm working in other places that I've had a word with myself and said, no, you're going to ask for more money. You're going to be a bit more assertive here. You're not just going to accept, this is the way it is. Challenging some leadership people in, where I'm working at the moment. It feels really good. Like, just feels like you say, it's the way you do it, the way you hold those conversations in yourself, and you're empowering yourself to take more control over what you're doing, over your life, your career, whatever it is that you're doing. I think that's, yeah, it's a really interesting, slightly sad um fact of looking at, how women behave in the workplace. I hope we can help stimulate some change there.
Yeah, just to at least start to have the conversations. I think I'm definitely guilty of doing fantastic work like in the past. Less so now. I run my own business because I can't be like, oh, I'll do it for free. No, I bloody won't. But like in the past, of almost doing great work and expecting someone to be like, well done, here's a little gold star for you. And I was kind of like reflecting on it, and I was like, well, it's because I've got, great grades at school and whatnot. But that's because you have a set system that's designed for, if you follow the system, you will be rewarded, and you have that feedback from a teacher. And I remember reading a book by Carol Dweck called Mindset, Growth Mindset.
Yeah.
And in there, she has some amazing research that says, like, girls tend to outperform boys like quite early on, and even into graduate school. But I think it's after about 2 years of graduating have fallen behind in the pay scale. And some of that is linked to the fact that, like, boys tend to not be so agreeable even in the classroom. They're kind of like challenging authority and stuff, whereas we're almost like grateful to be there and like and so we're not challenging the authority. And I think there's societal things of, as a woman, societally you're expected to be polite, agreeable, kind, nurturing, all those sorts of things. I'm not saying don't be those things, that it's not like, again, don't fall into a dichotomy thinking, but where is it that you can communicate your needs, and if they don't get met, then you make a decision with that information, but you've got to at least express it. You can't assume people are going to just give it to you. That's not how it works.
Yeah. Oh, definitely not. I think definitely don't assume that things are just going to come your way. It's not the way the world works in reality, is it? We have to put ourselves out there and be more open about what we want and what we need. It's just being courageous. It feels being courageous to us, I think, to do that and put our voices out there. But it shouldn't need to feel like that. It shouldn't need to be such a big deal for us.
Well, when you've been a manager, like, if anyone listening, if you've ever been a manager, can you honestly put your hand on your heart and say you have noticed every hard bit of work that everyone on your team has done at every point? You haven't. It's not that you're a bad manager, it's that you have a job that you need to get done. So there's also an element of, you need to help someone to understand the work and the contribution you have done, rather than assume they have the time to find that out. You're supposed to be able to then, like, communicate, hey, I've done this and this was great and this was the reason why the client was happy. That's it. That's all they need to do. But at least then they're aware of what work and contribution you've made.
Yeah, I learned the hard way, I think, about that during the sort of performance year end. And if you did not give yourself a good write-up, if you did not promote yourself, and your manager was not aware of the things that you'd been doing, then they couldn't talk about it in moderation, and then it's you fall to the back or to the bottom, not to the bottom, but yeah. So it's a good lesson to learn how to story tell yourself and self-promote without that sort of, it feels very unnatural, I think, to many people to do that, feeling that we're being arrogant or
well, again, it's
yeah.
I think there's a female socialization aspect of it. When you're a little kid, if you want to be accepted as a group of girls, you generally have to conform and be nice and play with the others. You'll see it, like, if you've ever watched something like The Secret Life of 4-Year-Olds, girls have to kind of be similar and act similar to belong to part of the group. And whereas boys are almost fighting and doing other things, like, from a sociological perspective. So I do think sometimes there's an element of that inbuilt in us, to not sort of want to put our head above water in case then we're the outsider.
Pushed out the group. That's not a nice feeling, is it? Gosh,
Yeah.
are we doing to ourselves? Society, come on.
I think it's getting a lot better just in general,
Mm,
because I think things like the social media, whether you're a fan or not, I think one of the great aspects is it enables everybody to say something if they wish to. Not everyone should, but that's a separate story. It does enable you to level the playing field for yourself and to share what you're doing to other people and communicate more frequently about the things that you're working on. A little tip that has done me the world of good is to have a little folder where I've got feedback from someone, like written feedback from an email, or from maybe if I've just taken notes or something, just to remind myself of the great work I've done. So I can remind myself, especially as a business owner now, you don't get that much feedback. A lot of it's just like, thanks, because that's what you're being paid to do. And it's almost helping myself to check in and be like, no, that was great work. They were happy. Everything got delivered. All the bills are being paid. Everything's, ticking along. So it's good to have that for your own sense of progression.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, especially like you say, as a business owner or self-employed, where you're not getting that feedback from a manager, giving you that, well done, great job, all right, here's your next project, anything. It's, yeah, if you need to seek it out from your clients and store it up so you can remind yourself that you're doing a good job. I think I like that, having a space.
Yeah, give it to yourself to remind yourself like what's working, because it is harder sometimes being on your own because you don't get that feedback. But then there's benefits in the sense that you can create something that's really unique for what you want to do in the world.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. So what's next for you, Ilona? What's next for you in your business, to your next innovative step?
Well, I am now going into delivering leadership development to startups and scale-ups, because that's my speciality. That's what my podcast is all about, still loading, leadership for the digital age. And so that's what I'm going to be doing, because that I noticed when I was at a scale-up and also consulting at the moment now for scale-ups, is that there is no leadership development provision for these groups, for these kinds of companies. So they're kind of going through their huge growth, so it's just before they're hitting that, and often people have been given absolutely no resources on how to best manage a team, handle difficult conversations, but also doing that in a completely remote, hybrid, new alternative ways of working world. So that's what we're doing. We're delivering leadership development for scale-ups, so it's really exciting.
Yeah, and you're on, what was it, series 3 or no?
Series 3 of the series
3 of the podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah, awesome. Well done.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much for
Well, thank
joining
you for
me
having
and
me.
having this conversation. I think I'm probably going to have to listen back myself to just, digest everything that we've talked about. It's really been fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your checkered career.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.